Hi guys, welcome to the Erin Pouch Sew Along. This is the first pattern in the LeJanaro B collection. This is a free pattern. I'll link the information on how to get the pattern and the instructions in the description box below, and then you can come back and sew along with me. Don't forget to tag me on social media at LeJanaro. I can't wait to see all of your wonderful projects.
So let's talk about everything you're going to need to make the Erin pouch. Of course, you're going to need your pattern. So go ahead and print out your pattern. You're going to need some fabric. I'm just using these fat quarters that I got from Walmart. You're going to need some coordinating thread, a zipper. If you're going to make the wristlet, then you need to cut out 2 additional pattern pieces, a tab, which is measured 2.5 by 2.5, as well as the strap for the wristlet, which measures 3.5 by 15. You'll also need a D-ring as well as a swivel clasp if you're going to make the wristlet. You're going to need some scissors, one for paper and one for fabric. You're going to need a magnetic snap. You're also going to need a marking pen to mark the place for the magnetic snap, a seam ripper, as well as some pliers. All right, so let's get started by cutting out our pattern. Using your paper scissors, you're going to go ahead and cut out your 2 pattern pieces. You should have piece 1 and piece 2. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to cut around my lines. All right, and you're going to do the same thing for pattern piece number 2. Let's talk about what you need to cut out with each of the pattern pieces. So for piece number 1, your main piece, you're going to cut out 2 of exterior fabric, 2 of lining, 2 of fusible fleece, and 2 of woven interfacing. For pattern piece number 2, you're going to cut out 1 for the exterior fabric, 1 for the lining, 1 of fusible fleece, and 1 of woven interfacing. All right, so I have my fabric for my main piece and my front piece, and I'm going to use the same fabrics for the lining as well. So let's get started with cutting out our pattern pieces. I'm going to start with piece number 1. I'm going to set this aside. And I just folded the fat quarter in half. And I'm just going to line my pattern piece up. I'm going to place some pattern weights. This pattern piece is small, so usually I use my hand, but pattern weights is better to use to make sure that your pattern stays in place. So I'm just going to cut around. All right, so I have my exterior fabric cut out. Now I'm going to cut out my lining piece. The fabric that I'm using for my front piece, which is pattern piece number 2, I'm also going to use that as my lining fabric. Place my pattern weights down. All right, so I have my 2 pieces for the exterior and my 2 pieces for the lining, and then you cut out your interfacing the same way. All right, so let's cut out pattern piece number 2, which is your front piece. Now I'm just going to use the same fabric for the exterior fabric and the lining fabric. So you cut 1 for the exterior and 1 for the lining. All right, so you also cut out your interfacing the same way. And don't forget, you're only cutting one. So you'll cut one of fusible fleece and one of woven interfacing. If you decide that you're going to do the wristlet, go ahead and cut out your wristlet, the fabric for your wristlet, and also your tab. All right, so you have your purse tab and you have your wristlet cut out. Make sure you cut one of each of woven interfacing. All right, so I have my fusible fleece here, and this is my main piece, and I have to cut 2 of fusible fleece. You also need to cut 1 of fusible fleece for the piece number 2, your outside pocket. Now I'm going to cut my woven interfacing. So for piece number 1, I'm cutting 2 of the woven interfacing, and that's for the lining pieces. And for the outside pocket, piece number 2, I'm cutting 1 of woven interfacing for the lining. Before we iron our interfacing to our pattern pieces, let's go over everything you're going to need. So for pattern piece number 1, your main piece, you need 2 of your exterior fabric, and you need 2 of fusible fleece. You need 2 of the lining pieces and 2 of the woven interfacing. For piece number 2, you need 1 of your exterior fabric and 1 for your lining. I'm using the same fabric for my exterior and lining. But for the exterior piece, you need 1 of fusible fleece and 1 of woven interfacing. If you're doing the wristlet, you need 1 piece for your purse tab, and you need 1 of woven interfacing. And the wristlet, you need 1 of your wristlet fabric and 1 of woven interfacing. All right, now let's get all of our pieces interfaced. All right, so I'm only going to do the main pieces on camera, but you do the other pieces the same way. So here's my exterior fabric. This is the fabric that I'm adding the fusible fleece to. So what you want to do on the wrong side of your fabric, you want to place the bumpy side of your fusible fleece to the wrong side of your exterior fabric. All right? So this is the wrong side. This is the fusible fleece. What I like to do, I like to take a pressing cloth And this is just some organza that my mom serged that I use as my pressing cloth. So I'm going to take my iron, and I am using steam for this fusible fleece, and I'm going to just press down. I do kind of slide off a little bit as I'm moving it, just so it won't get the iron marks on the fabric. But the pressing cloth helps with that as well. And I just go over it a couple more times in different spots just to make sure it is properly fused. And now your fleece is fused to your main pattern piece. Do the same thing to the other main pattern piece. All right, so we have our main pieces interfaced. Now we're going to interface our lining pieces, and we're using the woven interfacing. And it's pretty much, and it's the same process. You want to have the wrong side of the fabric facing up. Your interfacing, make sure the bumpy side is down. My pressing cloth. And I just press and hold. Make sure to not leave it in one spot for too long. And you do the other piece the same way. When you're doing your front pocket piece, which is your pattern piece number 2, just remember you're doing fusible fleece for one piece and woven interfacing for the other piece. Once you get all your pieces interfaced, I'll meet you back at the table so we can start assembling our bag. So now that all of our pieces are interfaced, we're going to add our magnetic snap. So on your pattern pieces, pieces 1 and 2, you're going to see a little black dot, and under it, it says magnetic snap placement. So the pieces that I'm working with one main exterior piece, and I'm working with the lining of the front piece, right? So not the front piece with the fusible fleece, but the front piece with the woven interfacing, which is the lining. That's the piece that I'm working with for the magnetic snaps. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to work with one at a time. I'm going to take my main piece, flip it to the wrong side, and I'm going to put my pattern piece on top. So right where you see that black dot on your pattern piece, I'm just going to poke a hole through my pattern piece with my friction pin. And I'm just going to make a dot so I'll know that's where my magnetic snap needs to go on this pattern piece. And I'll just make my little dot there. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to do the same thing with pattern piece number 2. I'm going to flip my piece over. And I'm just going to poke a hole just like I did in the other pattern piece where that magnetic snap should go. All right. Set my pattern piece to the side. Now with your magnetic snap, you should have your male and female pieces to your magnetic snap. I'm going to use the female piece for my main pattern piece. I'm going to use the male piece for my lining. So I'm going to set the male piece aside. And you should also have these little washers. All right. So what I like to do, there's a circle in the middle of this little washer. I placed the circle right on top of the mark that I made on my pattern piece. And there's 2 slots here on each side. So I'm placing my washer there. I'm taking my friction pen and I'm just marking where the slots are. So that's how I know where I need to use my seam ripper to make slight openings so I can put my magnetic snap in. All right. So I'm going to take my seam ripper, and my magnetic snaps are really small, so I'm not going to make a large slit. So I'm just going to take my seam ripper, make a tiny little slit on both sides of the circle. Be very careful when you're doing this. You don't want to force it. All right. So going to take my male piece, and those slits that I made, I'm just going to poke it through those slits I made. And what I like to do, you can definitely use fusible fleece to do this just as a extra backing. This is some foam interfacing that I have. And I'm just going to take the little washer, and those 2 slits, I'm going to make it in the foam interfacing. And this is just for extra security. You don't have to do this. I just do it for extra security because you'll be opening and closing the snap. So I don't want it to get worn out and then poke a hole through the fabric in the purse. So I put the foam on top. I put the washer on top. And now I'm going to take my pliers and I'm just going to bend the prongs back. So now you have the first part of your magnetic snap done. So second part, I'm going to do the same thing. On my second pattern piece, I'm going to take my washer, place it on top of the mark I made. Take my friction pen and just mark the sides where I need to make my slashes. Take my seam ripper, and again, be careful. You don't want to make one too big. I'm going to take my male end, stick it through the slashes that I made. Take my little foam piece and make the slashes. Be careful not to poke yourself like I almost did. Place it on top. Add your washer and take your pliers and bend the prongs. So now you've added your magnetic snap. What I like to do, I just like to place them on top of each other just so I'll know that they fit properly. All right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to take our 2 front pieces. This is the front piece with the fusible fleece. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to place them right sides facing. So your two front pieces with right sides facing, I'm going to take some Wonder clips and I'm just going to clip along the top edge. And make sure that you can feel your magnetic snap right here. You don't want this, put this as your top edge because your magnetic snap won't line up. So your magnetic snap, you should feel it here. Place these right sides facing. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew about 1/4 of an inch across the top. All right, so we're going to sew about 1/4 of an inch down the top. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Cut off any loose threads. Now what you're going to do, you're going to take this to your ironing board. You're going to flip it around so that the wrong sides are facing. Take it to your ironing board, give it a good press. I like to put Wonder clips on it just so it stays in place. So I'm going to take this to the ironing board and I'm going to press it down real good. All right, so let's press this down. I have my magnetic snap up, that way I can see where it is so I don't iron over it. And I'm just kind of straightening it out here. Doing some finger pressing. And you want to take this back to the sewing machine and then just top stitch across the top edge. All right, now you have your top stitching done. So now what we're going to do, we're going to take our front pocket piece where we have our magnetic snap, and we're going to take the main front piece with the magnetic snap, and we're going to place them together. So best way to do it is just put your snaps together. And we're going to baste these on the side just to ensure that they stay in place. Your basting stitch is the longest stitch on your machine. Mine is a 4. So I'm just going to make sure they're lined up. You don't want it to look like this. So make sure they're lined up properly. Cut any loose threads. All right, so now that we have our sides basted down, now I'm going to set this piece aside. I'm going to the other main piece and a lining piece. All right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to assemble our bag. So I have my other main piece, not the piece with the snap, and I have a lining piece, just one lining piece. So what you're going to do, you're going to take your zipper. Always test to make sure my zipper works properly. All right, so you're taking your zipper, and on your front piece, you're going to place your zipper down. Your zipper pull is facing down, and you're going to place it the top of your main piece, and you're going to place your lining piece on top of the zipper. You're just going to sandwich them in between. I'm going to take some Wonder Clips. And we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew these pieces together with the zipper. All right, so don't forget to put your machine back on your regular length stitch because we did the basting stitch earlier. You're going to switch to your zipper foot. You're going to take your pieces, make sure they're lined up. They should be lined up if you use Wonder Clips. You're going to sew them together. Back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Cut off any loose threads. And now what you're going to do, you can take this to the ironing board and give it a press. I'm just going to finger press it. I'm going to switch back to my regular presser foot. And I'm going to top stitch. And you can increase the length of your stitches if you want to on your top stitch. I'm just not going to do it for the video purposes. All right, so now we're going to add the other pieces to the other side of the zipper. All right, so now we have our other front piece, the front piece with the pocket on it and the lining piece. Now we're going to add that to the other side of the zipper. And I noticed that my pocket was a little bit longer than my front piece. That's fine. You can trim that off if you want to, or you can leave it. You're just going to sew it together anyway. But I'm just going to trim it off. So it'll be nice and neat. So let's take our other main piece. We're going to place it with right sides facing, making sure that you line everything up properly and your zipper pull is facing the right side of your fabric. So I'm just going to take Wonder Clips just to kind of hold it in place. I'm going to flip it over so that my lining is showing. And now I'm going to place my lining fabric's right sides facing, making sure everything is lined up properly. Now I'm just going to clip everything together. Going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew down this side. Make sure you're using your zipper foot. Cut any loose threads. All right. You're going to flip this just like you did the other side. With the two pieces together, with the wrong sides together. And you can either take it to the ironing board. I'm just going to finger press like I did the last time. And I'm going to top stitch. I'm going to change to my regular presser foot really quick. And I am just going to top stitch. So let's take this back to the table and finish assembling our bag. Before we assemble our bag, let's work on our pieces for our wristlet. So this is my purse tab where I'm going to add my D-ring. But what I'm going to do first, I'm going to take it. I've already ironed my interfacing to the wrong side. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm going to press. And then I'm going to take one side and fold it towards the middle. And I'm going to press. This just kind of helps to make the creases so you can see them. I flipped it over and I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Just going to fold it to the middle and press. So now what I can do, with both pieces folded to the middle, I then fold those onto each other and press. I'll usually put a wonder clip on here just to hold it in place. And what we're going to do, we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew down the edge. Before I do that, I'm going to do the same thing with the wristlet strap. So this is my wristlet strap. I'm going to fold it in half just like I did the purse tab and press. I'm going to open it up, fold the one side to the middle, and press. Turn it around, fold the other side to the middle, and press. Now I'm going to fold both sides onto themselves. It's a little hot. I'm going to press. I'm going to use some wonder clips. Just to hold it in place. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and sew down the side. So this is the purse tab, and I'm just going to take it and I'm going to sew down the edge, back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And do the same thing to the other side, just so it'll look uniform. And I switched from that D-ring to a keychain ring. I don't know if that's what you call them, but that's what I switched to. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to place my purse tab, and I'm going to fold it. And then I'm just going to sew this raw edge here, the raw edges together. And I did backstitch a couple of times just to secure it. All right, I'm going to set this aside, and while we're here, let's go ahead and do our wristlet. Just going to sew down the open edge. So now that your wristlet is done, we're going to take our swivel clasp and we're going to place it through your wristlet like this. All right. And you're going to sew the two raw edges together. Make sure you backstitch a couple of times. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to just kind of, hopefully you can see this, flip it so I'm turning it to the other side like that. And I'm going to take the swivel clasp and I'm going to place it in between. I'm going to sandwich it in between those two raw edges. I can get it in between the two raw edges. All right, so it looks like that. Hopefully yours is a lot neater than mine. So my swivel clasp is sandwiched between those two raw edges. Now I'm just going to sew across here to secure it. Now you can get fancy and put a rivet there. That will look really nice, but I'm just going to sew across really close. Make sure you back stitch a couple of times as well. Cut off any loose threads. Make sure you clean it up really well. And you can actually set this part aside until you finish your bag. All right, so we have our bag sewn together. So what you're going to do now, you're going to unzip your zipper about halfway. You always want to make sure you do that, because if you don't, you won't be able to open the bag when it's time to turn it. So you're going to take your two main pieces, put them right side spacing, and your lining pieces with right side spacing. And you're going to line them up. You want to make sure that these two edges are lined together. Take my wonder clips and clip them together. You also want to make sure that the zipper tape is facing the lining. So I'm just going to flip it over, do the same thing. Make sure my two edges are lined up. My zipper tape is facing the lining. I'll take my wonder clips and clip it together. And I'm just going to continue to clip all the way around. Here is where you want to add your purse tab piece for your wristlet. So you decide which side you want it on, and that's where you'll add it. When you're clipping your lining together, make sure you leave an opening 3 or 4 inches in the lining so you can turn your bag. So starting at the bottom of the lining, where I have my first wonder clip, and at the bottom of the lining, I'm going to sew around, and make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end, and don't forget to leave your opening in the bottom of the lining. When you get to the corner, make sure you back stitch. Make sure your needle is down and pivot. Back stitch and continue sewing around. Okay, so now that we have our pouch sewn all the way around, what you want to do now is you want to clip the edges, and you want to clip as close to the stitching as you can, but not going over the stitching, because you don't want your pouch to come apart. So I just kind of place my hand, my thumb right there, and trim that way. That way I know I'm not cutting through the stitching. All right, and I'm just going to trim a little bit off the sides, just so it won't be as bulky on the sides. Just a little bit off the bottom. And the sides again. Right, so now we're going to turn the pouch to the right side, just using the opening that we left in the lining. I'm just gonna use my hands to open the zipper up a little bit more to help turn it better. So just turn, turn, turn. So I'm just going to use my finger to poke out my corners. Just poking out all the corners. Now take your lining and do the same thing. Poke out your corners. Alright. So the only thing left to do now is to close the opening that you left in the lining, and I'm just going to sew. You can press it to make it behave a little bit better, or you can use some wonder clips or some pins. And I'm just going to sew really close to the edge and close this opening. So I sewed the opening in the lining, so now I'm just going to place the lining on the inside of the bag or pouch. Put it down in there nice and neat. Close my zipper. Add my wristlet. All right, and we're all done. You have your snap pocket there. Hopefully you can see that. And you have your zip pocket on the top. It's fully lined. And you have a wristlet.